Hey everyone, Rob here, and I have breaking news coming out of the meteorological office here in Iceland with some brand new Sentinel-1 data that was released today, February the 5th, 2024. Now, in the sort of news that they've put out, they said magma accumulation under Svartsengi continues, although the sort of land mass has slowed down there in the last few days. A similar process occurred for the magma flows and eruptions that occurred in January 2024 as well as December 2023. Now, according to newly updated models based on satellite and GPS data covering the period from January 16 to February 5th, the amount of magma under Svartsengi is now estimated at 9 million cubic meters. It is estimated that around 9 to 13 million cubic meters flowed from the magma collection area under Svartsengi when the magma flowed from there and erupted near Hagafell on January 14th. Therefore, the estimated amount of magma under Svartsengi has now reached the lower limit of the amount believed to have accumulated there before the last eruption. There is therefore, in their opinion, an increased probability of magma flow and an eruption in the coming days. Now, since Friday, close to 200 earthquakes have been recorded in the area north of Grindavik, most of them around or below a magnitude of 1 at a depth of 3 to 4 kilometers. The largest earthquake occurred in the morning of Sunday, February 4th at Sundnuk and measured 2.2 at a depth of almost 6 kilometers. Now, the meteorological office's round-the-clock watch will continue to monitor the area extremely closely, and the current hazard assessment map that presented in the previous video remains in effect until 3 p.m. on February 8th, all things being equal, is what they say. Now, what we're looking at here is a waveform cross-sectional image showing land rise during the period from January 23rd to February 4th. Gray areas in the image show areas where the land changes could not be measured due to changes in snow cover during all of that. But if we zoom in, and we sort of take a look at the graph towards the bottom, we can see that land rise, the higher limit, is 60 millimeters over this period of time from the 23rd to the 4th. And then, of course, as it goes, from red, 60, yellow, green, and then down towards the negatives. If we zoom in, we can see exactly where this land rise is occurring. Now, we're talking a lot about the Blue Lagoon very recently in what's been going on. And let's just take a quick look as I jump over to the old assessment map, just so that everyone can see exactly where things are. So if we take a look at this map here, and we'll just put it side by side, we have the Blue Lagoon right here. We have the newest sort of eruption that occurred in January here, and then we have the one from December just above. If we take a look at the land rise, we can see, based on the old eruptions and the mountain range, we see the Blue Lagoon is right in this area here. Again, we can see the water and the mountains, and then the Blue Lagoon. So the land rise is actually not occurring in this red zone that we see here on the assessment map, but actually closer to the Blue Lagoon in this area over here. So again, taking a look, we have the Blue Lagoon, it's this water feature here, and then we of course have land rise, and we have the water feature, which is the Blue Lagoon. And then to sort of the left and down, we have the strongest land rise. Now, I know that there's a lot of talk about where the next eruption is going to be. Based on the previous two, it's estimated that it will be in the similar area. You can see the line going down. Again, we'll zoom in. Going down this path, following the path down into Grindavik, which is where we see a lot of the earthquake damage. And of course, eruption number 1, eruption number 2, and then the second or first fissure from the second eruption is there. And then over to the left here, we have the Fagradalsfjall and the previous eruptions that kind of occurred, 1, 2, 3, all on top of each other here. So it's a really sensitive area that's been going on over in this Grindavik region, which is why Grindavik has been closed. But again, I'm a bit surprised that the Blue Lagoon has remained open, and more data coming out Yeah, I mean, it's sort of wondering, although the eruptions are here, the land rises over here. So maybe someone in the comments can let me know. Does it matter that the land rise is occurring in an area where, the Blue Lagoon is versus where the eruptions? Why is there's this sort of difference there? So if someone in the comments knows, that'd be fantastic. But one thing that came out, and there's a Facebook post, an owner of a fish processing company in Grindavik has filed a lawsuit against the Icelandic government due to the ban on his presence and his business operations in Grindavik. Now we have Stefan Kristjansson. He reported this, you can see on his Facebook page 5 hours ago, in a post that he says he has the constitutionally protected right to guard his property and his business. He should be allowed to stay in his home in Grindavik if he so chooses. And he quotes as saying, that right has been trampled on repeatedly, and that's why he has brought this case forward. And you can see the Icelandic and then, of course, the auto translation there. Now, here we have also a picture of the complaint he filed against the Icelandic government with, Minister of Justice representing the National Police Commissioner and the police chief in Suðurnes. His lawyer, Jón Gunnlaugsson, handles the case on Stefan's behalf and has requested that it be confirmed that Stefan was not obliged to obey the decision of the National Police Commissioner from January 13, 2024, regarding the ban on his going to Grindavik and staying there in his own house. He's asking for an expedited hearing, and the Reykjavik District Court agreed to this request. Now, the news agencies, of course, all over this. He couldn't be reached during the processing of any of the news. However, he's previously commented on the decisions of the public defense and the authorities regarding the closures of the town. In his opinion, Grindavik should not be closed and people should be allowed to go there. Now, his company opened last on January 9th after a 2-month closure. And people have been warned that they may need to prepare to leave the town quickly again. And, of course, there's mixed feelings on whether or not Grindavik should be open or not, as there have been in many parts of Iceland that have volcanic activity. And a week later after opening, the volcanic eruption began in the town limits and everyone was again forced out. So it's definitely something that he's keeping an eye on, and he's going to fight for his right to go to his house and to be there. Now, in other news, Benedikt Óferðinsson, who is the head of deformation measurements at the Meteorological Agency, he was interviewed with the news agencies. He says there's a high probability of a third volcanic eruption in the Reykjanes Peninsula in the near future. Situation, as we saw from the news report from the Meteorological Office directly, he said that all of this is similar to before the last eruption. And he's saying that the monitoring data shows very similar signals to the last week or two before the January 14th eruption, and actually December 18th as well. So we're seeing the same thing happening time and time again on these eruptions. Now, when he was asked if there's a pattern now, he says, yeah, it's become pretty regularly. We now are seeing eruptions pretty much every month, and it's a question of whether it's going to continue like this. And he stops saying that we can't actually predict that if this is going to be a eruption in February, March, April, etc. But he says the data is behaving in such a way now that it continues at a similar rate. As we were saying, the amount of magma in these chambers under Svartsengi is believed to now become more than what went in prior to the eruption in Grindavik in January. And as we said, and taking a look at all of these measurements, it's around 9 million cubic meters since the end of the eruption in January that's been filling up. Now, when he was asked where is it going to be most likely that the magma would arise or the eruption would occur, he was saying that it's going to be in the same areas as the last two times, between Stor Skogafell and Hagafell. Now, if you don't know where that is, we can take a look here. So we have Hagafell right here down at the bottom, and maybe it's better if I zoom out. Hagafell is here at the bottom in this red area, and Stor Skogafell is here towards the top. So it's in this region, which is also why the Meteorological Agency has marked this dangerous region higher than all the other ones. This red region here, which is Area 3. So that's his thought. Speaking back on Grindavik just for a minute, the media, with the exception of me, but we're allowed to hopefully use some of their images thanks to that. They were allowed to go to Grindavik today for the first time in 3 weeks. Now, this is by invitation only. And so it's the major news agencies that have all of these photos. The last trip before today was 2 days after the eruption, but since then the town has more or less been kept closed. And the main issue that people have been allowed to go into the town for was saving valuables from their homes. Now, the media members, they were not allowed to follow people that are going into their homes to get things, and they were driven basically in a bus to places that the police had decided and handpicked in advance. All these places were on the outskirts of town, away from all of the people that have been allowed to go into town to their private homes and businesses. The media's report is saying it's quite striking to see what they were able to see, as you can see one of the pictures coming up from here. And they said there was a strong smell of sulfur in the town, and the lava, from them saying, is still steaming in several places. It takes a long time to cool down. Quite obvious that it's still boiling hot underneath, as the heat can still seen being, rising from the surface. And we see, again, pictures here. It's very cold in Iceland right now, but we have pictures here showcasing that very heat. They visited industrial areas in the harbor area. The town's business activities and everything has been largely paralyzed since the town was evacuated in November. And as we saw, there's lawsuits now being filed. And it's just a sad sight being reported from the news agencies on the shape of this town. Now, of course, we are seeing the worst of the worst. The news agencies are not going on and reporting and taking pictures of perfectly normal looking houses, and that's not what makes news interesting. But it is important to note that not every area of Grindavik looks like this, and that's another thing that the business owner who's filing the lawsuit, he says that not all of Grindavik is like this, and there are safe areas. So it's just something that I wanted to point out is not entirely everything that you see on the news. It's not like a disaster town overall. But very empty. The news went in. They were able to see what kind of stuff there was. And interestingly enough, strong smell of sulfur. So anyone's guess how it's going to unfold over the next little while. And last but not least, let's take a look at some of the earthquake data. We can see here, as we've been mentioning over the past couple of videos, it looks like the seismic activity is picking up, although still remaining quite low in the magnitude. We are seeing more and more activity happening, and there is some of them that are peaking up above a magnitude of 2 and sort of starting to creep up to that magnitude of 3. If we rewind about a week or two, I believe, and I don't have the exact number in front of me, but we were looking at maybe 10-20% of the earthquakes and seismic activity that we're seeing now. And so there is a substantial increase if we're looking at 2 weeks ago till now on the activity. Not sure what that entirely means. It could just be normal earthquakes, but if we look at all of Iceland, it is still the Reykjanes Peninsula area that is really suffering the most seismic activity. But before we go, one last fun fact. The interesting thing on these maps is you can see the sort of band in the tectonic plate area and where all the seismic activity takes place across Iceland, and this is kind of where all the volcanoes are along these earthquake areas. So that's it for today. Keep stay tuned. There's a lot of news that's going to be coming up, and I'm sure it's going to be any day before we really hear something big. I don't think this is over quite yet. So thanks so much for watching. Until next time, hope you enjoyed this.